The champagne glass shattered against marble with a sound that made the entire ballroom fall silent. Rachel Hart stood in the doorway, transformed beyond recognition. Crimson gown clinging to curves her husband had spent years convincing her didn't exist, diamond earrings catching light like fragments of her shattered obedience. Across the room, Daniel Hart's face drained of color as 300 of the city's most powerful people turned to stare. His young assistant Vanessa clutched his arm tighter, but Rachel wasn't looking at them anymore. She was done being invisible. Tonight, she would make sure Daniel remembered exactly what he tried to destroy. Before we begin, if you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this journey travels. Now, let's dive in. The first time Daniel Hart told Rachel she was gaining weight, she'd laughed it off. They'd been married only 3 years then, and she still believed in the man who'd promised to build a life with her. She'd attributed it to stress. He was climbing the corporate ladder at Meridian Holdings, working 70-hour weeks, trying to make partner. Everyone said things they didn't mean under pressure. The second time, she'd started skipping dessert. The third time, she'd stopped eating lunch. By year 7, Rachel no longer recognized the woman in the mirror. Not because her body had changed, though it had, sculpted by anxiety and carefully controlled portions, but because the light behind her eyes had dimmed to almost nothing. "You're wearing that?" Daniel's voice cut through the bedroom as Rachel fastened her pearl necklace. It was a Saturday evening in late September, and they were due at the Hendersons' anniversary party in 40 minutes. Rachel glanced down at her navy dress. Conservative, elegant, the kind of outfit that had always served her well at corporate functions. What's wrong with it? Nothing, if you're trying to look like someone's grandmother. Daniel adjusted his cufflinks without looking at her. Vanessa mentioned she's wearing emerald green. Very bold. Very now. There it was. Vanessa. Always Vanessa. Vanessa Clark had joined Meridian Holdings 8 months ago as Daniel's executive assistant. 26 years old, fresh from her MBA, all ambition and sharp edges wrapped in designer labels. Daniel mentioned her constantly, her insights during meetings, her innovative ideas, her refreshing perspective. Rachel had met her twice. Both times, Vanessa had looked at Rachel the way someone might examine an outdated piece of furniture, with polite dismissal and silent calculation about when it might be replaced. "I'll change," Rachel heard herself say, hating the automatic compliance in her voice. "Don't bother now. We're already late because you took so long with your makeup." Daniel grabbed his keys, which, by the way, that shade of lipstick washes you out. You should ask Vanessa for recommendations. She always looks put together. The drive to the Hendersons took 20 minutes. Daniel spent 18 of them on a phone call with Marcus Whitmore, Meridian's senior partner, discussing some acquisition deal. Rachel stared out the window at the glittering downtown skyline, remembering a version of herself who used to love this city. Before Daniel, Rachel had been building something. After graduating with a degree in interior design, she'd worked her way up at Hartwell and Associates, one of the most prestigious design firms in the region. She'd had clients, a portfolio, recognition. The coastal living feature on her beach house renovation had generated 3 months of new business. People had known her name. Then she'd met Daniel at a charity auction. Charming, successful, attentive in ways that had felt like sunlight after a long winter. He'd pursued her relentlessly, and she'd been flattered by his intensity. When he'd proposed after 8 months, she'd said yes without hesitation. The problem started small. A comment about her working late making him feel neglected. A suggestion that maybe she didn't need to take on that demanding commercial project. A carefully worded observation that successful men's wives typically focused on supporting their husbands' careers rather than competing with them. By their second anniversary, Rachel had left Hartwell and Associates. Just temporarily, she'd told herself, until we start a family. They'd tried for children for 3 years. When Rachel finally got pregnant with their daughter Emma, Daniel had seemed genuinely happy. Then came their son Jake 2 years later. Rachel had assumed motherhood would fill the void where her career used to be. Instead, the void grew larger. Because motherhood, she discovered, didn't protect her from Daniel's criticisms. If anything, it provided new ammunition. "The house is a mess. Emma's grades are slipping because you're not monitoring her homework. Other wives manage to look elegant, even with children. You've let yourself go. I work 60 hours a week to provide this lifestyle. The least you could do is make an effort." Each comment landed like a paper cut, small, sharp, accumulating into a constant sting she learned to ignore. The Hendersons' party was exactly as Rachel expected. The usual crowd of Meridian executives and their spouses scattered among the Hendersons' carefully curated mid-century modern furniture. Rachel had designed a similar aesthetic for a client once, back when she had clients. Rachel. Patricia Henderson materialized with champagne and air kisses. How lovely to see you. That dress is classic. Classic. The word women used when they meant outdated. Thank you for having us, Rachel said, accepting a glass she wouldn't drink. Daniel monitored her alcohol intake at these events. Too much champagne makes you loud, he'd told her after last year's holiday party. Patricia was already scanning the room, her attention fragmenting. Daniel mentioned he might bring that brilliant new assistant of his. Vanessa something? I'm so curious to meet her. Of course he had mentioned it. To everyone, apparently, except his own wife. She couldn't make it, Rachel said, though she had no idea if this was true. Oh, that's too bad. Patricia's disappointment seemed genuine. Well, do help yourself to the appetizers. Though maybe skip the Philo cups, they're absolutely sinful, calorie-wise. Rachel watched Patricia glide away. Her size 2 frame somehow managing to make concern about calories sound like friendly advice rather than judgment. Rachel Hart, is that you? She turned to find Mia Chen holding 2 champagne flutes and wearing a smile that actually reached her eyes. Mia had been Rachel's closest friend at Hartwell and Associates. While Rachel had left to support Daniel's career, Mia had stayed and thrived. She was now a senior designer with her own team. Mia! The relief in Rachel's voice was embarrassing. I haven't seen you in months. Mia handed her one of the champagne flutes, ignoring Rachel's half-hearted protest. Where has Daniel been hiding you? I've just been busy with the kids. You know how it is. I actually don't, which is why I live vicariously through your Instagram posts of Emma's soccer games and Jake's science projects. Mia's smile dimmed slightly. Are you okay? You look tired? Rachel supplied. Overwhelmed? Invisible? I was going to say thin, too thin. Mia's gaze was sharp with the kind of concern that came from genuine friendship. When's the last time we actually talked? Not texted. Talked. Rachel couldn't remember. Daniel didn't like it when she spent too much time on personal phone calls during the day, and evenings were consumed with managing the children's schedules and preparing dinners that Daniel would inevitably critique. We should get coffee, Rachel said, knowing she wouldn't follow through. We should, Mia agreed, clearly knowing it too. But seriously, Rachel, are you... There you are. Daniel's hand landed on Rachel's lower back, proprietary and cold. Marcus wants to introduce me to some potential investors. Let's go. Actually, I was just catching up with Mia, Rachel started. You can catch up later. This is important. Daniel's fingers pressed harder against her spine. A warning. Rachel looked at Mia, saw the concern deepen in her friend's expression, and felt shame burn through her chest. I'll text you, she said quietly. Daniel steered her across the room with the efficiency of someone moving an object from one place to another. They stopped in front of Marcus Whitmore and 2 men Rachel didn't recognize. Gentlemen, my wife, Rachel. Daniel's introduction was perfunctory. Rachel, this is James Chen and Robert Lindquist. They're considering a significant investment in the Singapore expansion. Rachel shook hands, smiled appropriately, and prepared to stand silently while the men talked business. This was her role at these functions, decorative presence, proof of Daniel's stability and success. Your wife designed the Coastal Ridge development, didn't she? Robert Lindquist was looking at Rachel with actual interest. I have a colleague who bought one of those units. Incredible use of natural light. Rachel blinked. Someone remembered her work. Thank you. That project was... Rachel doesn't design anymore, Daniel interrupted smoothly. She focuses on our family now. Much more important work. The dismissal was casual, absolute. Robert nodded politely, and the conversation moved on. Rachel stood there, a ghost at her own life's funeral. 20 minutes later, she excused herself to the bathroom. The powder room was decorated in soothing grays and whites, with soft lighting that was meant to be flattering. Rachel stared at her reflection and saw a stranger. When had she become so small? Not physically, though she'd lost 20 pounds in the past year. Weight Daniel still suggested she could afford to lose. but spiritually, emotionally. The door opened and Patricia Henderson swept in, stopping short when she saw Rachel. "Oh, I didn't realize anyone was in here." Patricia moved to the second sink, touching up lipstick that didn't need touching up. "Having fun?" "Yes, it's a lovely party." Patricia studied Rachel's reflection in the mirror. "You know, I've always admired how you handle Daniel's intensity. He's brilliant, of course, but he can be demanding. My Thomas is the same way. These successful men, they require a certain kind of wife." Rachel felt something crack inside her chest. "What kind is that?" "Oh, you know, supportive, flexible, willing to put their needs first." Patricia capped her lipstick with a decisive click. "My mother always said, behind every successful man is a woman who knows when to be invisible." Invisible. The word hung in the air between them like poison. Patricia left, trailing expensive perfume and oblivious cruelty. Rachel gripped the edge of the marble sink, knuckles white. Invisible. Was that what she'd become? She returned to the party to find Daniel holding court near the fireplace, surrounded by admirers. He was in his element, confident, charismatic, commanding. This was the man she'd fallen in love with, or thought she had. Had he always been this way? Or had marriage given him permission to become it? "Your husband is something else." Vanessa's voice came from Rachel's right. She turned to find Daniel's assistant holding a martini and wearing a dress that probably cost more than Rachel's monthly grocery budget. "I thought you couldn't make it tonight," Rachel said carefully. "Daniel convinced me to stop by after my other engagement." Vanessa's smile didn't reach her eyes. "He said the investors would appreciate seeing Meridian's dynamic young team." Dynamic young team. While Rachel was home managing carpool schedules and making sure Jake's permission slips were signed. "That was thoughtful of him," Rachel heard herself say. Vanessa's gaze traveled over Rachel's navy dress with the same polite dismissal Rachel had seen before. "That's a very sensible outfit." Sensible. Classic. Invisible. Rachel excused herself and found Mia on the terrace, smoking a cigarette she'd supposedly quit 2 years ago. "Want one?" Mia offered the pack. "I don't smoke." "Neither do I, except when I'm at parties where I watch my brilliant, talented friends get treated like decorative furniture by their asshole husbands." Rachel should have defended Daniel, should have made excuses, should have done what she'd been doing for years, protecting his image at the expense of her truth. Instead, she took the cigarette. They smoked in silence, the September night cool against Rachel's skin. Below them, the city stretched out in glittering possibility, a view of a life Rachel used to inhabit. "Do you remember the Brennan Project?" Mia asked quietly. "That tech CEO's penthouse?" Rachel nodded. She'd spent 6 months on that design, creating a space that balanced masculine sophistication with warmth. It had won an industry award. "You were magic on that project, Rachel. The way you could read a client, understand what they needed before they even knew themselves. That's a gift." Mia turned to look at her. "What happened to that woman?" "She got married." "No, she got erased." Mia's voice was gentle but firm. "And you let it happen." The truth of it hit like a physical blow. Rachel had let it happen. Every time she'd changed clothes because Daniel didn't approve. Every time she'd skipped a meal to meet his standards. Every time she'd made herself smaller to accommodate his expansion. She'd been complicit in her own disappearance. "I don't know how to be her anymore," Rachel whispered. "Then find out." Mia stubbed out her cigarette. "Because watching you fade has been one of the most painful things I've ever witnessed." They went back inside. The party continued its relentless momentum, deals being discussed, alliances being formed, appearances being maintained. Rachel moved through it like a sleepwalker, seeing it all with new clarity. At 11 o'clock, Daniel decided it was time to leave. In the car, he was effusive about the connections he'd made, the opportunities that might emerge. "That went well," he said, satisfaction thick in his voice. "Though next time, maybe try to engage more in the conversations. You just stood there like a statue." Next time. The assumption that there would be a next time. That she would continue standing silently while he built his empire on the foundation of her erasure. "Vanessa was very impressive tonight," Daniel continued. "She has real instincts for this business. Natural charisma. Unlike you." The words hung unspoken but clear. Rachel stared out the window and said nothing. At home, she checked on Emma and Jake, both sleeping peacefully, unaware of their mother's quiet unraveling. She stood in Jake's doorway, watching his chest rise and fall, wondering what example she was setting. What was she teaching Emma about a woman's worth? What was she showing Jake about how men should treat their wives? In their bedroom, Daniel was already in bed, scrolling through his phone. "I'm thinking about bringing Vanessa to the Meridian Gala next month," he said casually, not looking up. Rachel froze in the act of removing her earrings. "The gala? Someone from the team should be there, and you hate those events anyway. You always complain about the heels, the small talk, the late night." "I've never complained about the gala." "You think it, though, I can tell." Daniel finally looked at her. "Besides, Vanessa can work the room better. She knows the business, knows the players. It makes sense." The gala. The biggest social event of Meridian's year. The one night when spouses were specifically expected, when marriages were displayed like trophies alongside professional achievements. And Daniel wanted to bring his assistant instead of his wife. "What will people think?" Rachel's voice was steady, despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. "They'll think I'm smart enough to prioritize business over antiquated social conventions." Daniel returned to his phone. "It's decided. You'll stay home with the kids. Stay home. Be invisible. Cease to exist." Rachel walked into the bathroom and closed the door. She stared at her reflection, the same stranger who'd looked back at her at the Hendersons' party. Behind every successful man is a woman who knows when to be invisible. No. The word formed silently, but with absolute certainty. No. She wouldn't be invisible. Not anymore. Rachel pulled out her phone and opened a text to Mia. "Coffee tomorrow? I need help with something." The response came immediately. "Finally, 10 a.m. I'm buying." Rachel looked at herself in the mirror again. Same face, same body. But something had shifted. Some essential recognition that she'd spent 7 years trying to become someone Daniel could love, when the real problem was that Daniel didn't know how to love anyone but himself. She'd made herself smaller and smaller, trying to fit into the shape of his approval. It was time to take up space again. The next morning, Rachel dropped Emma and Jake at school and drove to the coffee shop where she'd agreed to meet Mia. Her friend was already there, 2 lattes on the table, and concern etched across her features. "Talk to me," Mia said, without preamble. So Rachel did. All of it. The comments about her weight, her clothes, her inadequacy. The way Daniel had slowly isolated her from her career, her friends, her sense of self. The constant comparison to Vanessa. And finally, the gala. "He's taking his assistant instead of you?" Mia's voice was dangerously quiet. "To the one event where spouses are specifically expected? He says it makes business sense. It makes humiliation sense. Rachel, he's not just dismissing you, he's erasing you, in front of everyone who matters in his professional world." Mia leaned forward. "What are you going to do about it?" "I don't know. That's why I'm here." Mia was quiet for a long moment, studying Rachel's face. Then she smiled, sharp and determined. "How do you feel about making an entrance?" "What kind of entrance?" "The kind that reminds Daniel Hart and everyone else exactly who Rachel Hart was before he tried to make her disappear." Over the next hour, Mia outlined a plan. It was bold. It was risky. It was everything Rachel had trained herself not to be for the past 7 years. It was perfect. "Are you sure about this?" Mia asked as they prepared to leave. "Once you do this, there's no going back." Rachel thought about the woman in the mirror, the ghost of who she used to be, the person her children were learning to become. "I'm sure." The first step was the hair. Rachel made an appointment at the salon Mia recommended, the one where Vanessa apparently got her precision cut and dimensional color. "What are we doing today?" the stylist asked, running her fingers through Rachel's shoulder-length brown hair. Rachel pulled up a photo on her phone. Sharp angles, sophisticated layers, the kind of cut that demanded attention rather than apologizing for existing. This, exactly this. 2 hours later, she walked out with hair that moved like silk and made her feel dangerous. Step 2 was the wardrobe. Mia took her to boutiques Rachel had never dared enter, places where price tags were considered vulgar, and salespeople evaluated your worth before offering assistance. "We're looking for a gala dress," Mia announced to a skeptical saleswoman at the third boutique. "Something that stops traffic." The saleswoman's gaze traveled over Rachel's department store outfit with barely concealed disdain. The gala season pieces start at 3,000. Perfect, Mia said coolly. Show us everything in red. Rachel tried on 7 dresses. 6 of them were beautiful. The 7th was transformative. Crimson silk that hugged every curve Daniel had spent years convincing her to hide. A neckline that suggested rather than displayed. A slit that made her legs look endless. It was elegant and bold and utterly unapologetic. That's the one, Mia breathed. Rachel stared at her reflection. This wasn't the woman Daniel had been trying to create, small and grateful and invisible. This was the woman Rachel had buried. I'll take it, she heard herself say. The saleswoman's skepticism evaporated when Mia added shoes, jewelry, and a clutch to match. At the register, Rachel pulled out the credit card Daniel had given her years ago for household expenses and emergencies. This qualified as an emergency. The total made Rachel's hands shake, but she completed the transaction with a smile that felt like reclaiming territory. Over the next 3 weeks, Rachel prepared with the precision of someone planning a military campaign. She hired a personal trainer, not to lose weight, but to rebuild strength. She scheduled a makeup lesson. She practiced walking in 4-inch heels until her feet stopped screaming. And she told absolutely no one except Mia. Daniel was too busy with work to notice the changes. Or maybe he'd stopped looking at her years ago and simply hadn't realized she was evolving beyond his peripheral vision. Don't forget the gala is next Friday, he reminded her at breakfast one morning. I'll probably stay downtown that night since it'll run late. You don't mind watching the kids, right? Not at all, Rachel said serenely. She'd already arranged for her mother to babysit. The day of the gala, Rachel went through her normal routine: school drop-off, grocery shopping, preparing dinner. Daniel wouldn't eat because he was grabbing something before the event. At 5 o'clock, her mother arrived to watch Emma and Jake. Where are you going all dressed up? Emma asked, seeing Rachel in her robe. To a party. Is Daddy taking you? Rachel crouched down to her daughter's eye level. No, sweetheart, I'm taking myself. In her bedroom, Rachel transformed. The dress slid over her skin like a promise. The shoes added 3 inches of confidence. The makeup emphasized features she'd been taught to minimize. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw power. At 7:45, she called for a car. At 8 o'clock, the Meridian Holdings Gala was in full swing. Daniel stood near the bar with Vanessa, introducing her to Marcus Whitmore and a cluster of board members. She was wearing emerald green, exactly as she'd mentioned weeks ago. Your assistant is quite impressive, Marcus was saying. She really understands the Singapore dynamics. Rachel has been instrumental in developing that strategy, Daniel said, placing a possessive hand on Vanessa's lower back. The irony of using his wife's name while touching another woman wasn't lost on several observers. The ballroom doors opened. Rachel stepped inside. The effect was immediate and devastating. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. A collective intake of breath rippled through the crowd. She moved through the room like fire, burning away every assumption, every dismissal, every moment they'd written her off as Daniel Hart's invisible wife. Marcus Whitmore saw her first. His eyes widened in recognition, then something like admiration. Patricia Henderson actually gasped. And Daniel's face cycled through confusion, recognition, and pure shock in the span of 3 seconds. Rachel walked straight toward them, her heels clicking against marble like a countdown. Rachel! Daniel's voice cracked on her name. What are you doing here? I'm attending the gala. Her voice was calm, controlled. I am a spouse of a Meridian partner, after all. Vanessa's expression hardened. Daniel said you weren't feeling well. Did he? Rachel's gaze didn't leave her husband's face. How strange. I feel better than I have in years. People were gathering now, drawn by the spectacle. The wife who was supposed to stay home, the assistant who'd taken her place, the husband caught between his lie and the consequent standing in a red dress. We should talk about this privately, Daniel said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. Should we? You didn't seem to value privacy when you decided to bring another woman to this event instead of your wife. Rachel's voice carried across the ballroom, clear and unwavering. Or when you've spent months telling anyone who'll listen how inadequate I am, how I've let myself go, how I'm not polished enough, smart enough, present enough. Rachel, you're making a scene. Good. She smiled, and it was a blade wrapped in silk. You've spent 7 years trying to make me invisible, Daniel. Consider this me declining. Marcus Whitmore stepped forward, his expression carefully neutral. Perhaps we should all take a moment. No. Rachel cut him off gently but firmly. Her attention returned to Daniel. You wanted me small, quiet, grateful. You wanted a woman who would shrink every time you expanded, who would apologize for existing, who would accept humiliation as the price of your success. Her voice didn't rise, but somehow it filled the entire room. I did that. For 7 years, I made myself smaller and smaller, trying to fit into the shape of your approval. I gave up my career, my friends, my confidence. I let you convince me that I was the problem, that if I could just be thinner, quieter, more grateful, you might finally see me as enough. Daniel's face was pale, his jaw clenched. Around them, 300 witnesses stood frozen. But tonight, standing here in front of everyone who matters in your world, I finally understand something. Rachel took a breath, and it felt like the first real breath she'd taken in years. You didn't want to see me as enough, because if I was enough, if I was whole and confident and powerful, you might have to examine why you needed to break me down in the first place. The silence was absolute. Rachel, Daniel started, but she held up one hand. I'm not done. You brought Vanessa here tonight to humiliate me, to prove that I could be replaced, that I was so insignificant my absence wouldn't even register. She smiled again, and this time it held genuine amusement. But the only thing you've proven is that you never actually knew me at all. Rachel turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Daniel, when you get home tonight, whenever that might be, you'll find that I've moved into the guest room. My lawyer will be in touch on Monday. She walked out of the ballroom the same way she'd entered, head high, shoulders back, utterly unshakable. Behind her, the whispers exploded like champagne corks. In the car, Rachel's hands started shaking. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation began to fade, leaving her breathless and trembling. Her phone buzzed. Mia. That was magnificent. Another text, this one from Patricia Henderson of all people. I owe you an apology, and possibly champagne. Lots of champagne. Then another from Robert Lindquist, the investor who'd remembered her work. My firm is renovating our headquarters. Any chance you're accepting clients again? Rachel stared at that last message for a long moment. Was she accepting clients? She typed back. I might be. Let's talk next week. The car pulled up to her house. Inside, her mother was reading on the couch, while Emma and Jake slept upstairs. How was it? Her mother asked, looking up. Rachel thought about Daniel's shocked face, the silence that had fallen when she'd spoken her truth, the way Marcus Whitmore had looked at her, not with pity or dismissal, but with something like respect. It was perfect, Rachel said, and meant it. Rachel woke Sunday morning to 17 missed calls from Daniel and a single text message that read, "We need to talk. Now." She deleted it without responding. Downstairs, Emma was eating cereal at the kitchen counter while Jake built an elaborate tower out of his sister's books. Her mother had stayed the night, sleeping in what used to be Rachel's bedroom, the one she'd shared with Daniel for 7 years. Mommy, you look different, Emma observed, studying Rachel's face with the brutal honesty of 9-year-old perception. Different how? I don't know, like you're taller or something. Rachel smiled, pouring herself coffee. I'm the same height I've always been, sweetheart. No, you're not. Emma's certainty was absolute. You're definitely taller. Rachel's mother appeared in the doorway, still in her robe, watching this exchange with an expression Rachel couldn't quite read. After the kids scattered to play, she spoke. Your father called this morning. Rachel's hand stilled on her coffee mug. What did he want? Daniel called him, said you'd had some kind of breakdown at a work event, asked if we knew you were seeing a therapist. Her mother's voice was carefully neutral. Your father wanted to know if he should be worried. The manipulation was so predictable it was almost boring. Of course Daniel would spin it this way. His unstable wife causing a scene, embarrassing him in front of colleagues, clearly in need of professional help. And what did you tell him? Her mother was quiet for a long moment. I told him I'd never seen you more clear-headed in my life. Something in Rachel's chest loosened. Thank you. I should have said something years ago, Her mother's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I watched him diminish you, and I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere, that you were an adult who'd made your choice. But watching you disappear piece by piece, she stopped, composing herself. What you did last night took courage. Real courage. Rachel thought about the woman she'd been 72 hours ago. The one who would have apologized for existing, who would have absorbed Daniel's reframing of events and wondered if maybe she really was unstable. I'm filing for divorce, Rachel said. Her mother nodded like she'd been expecting this. Do you have a lawyer? Not yet. I do. Her mother pulled out her phone. Catherine Morrison. She handled Eleanor Brennan's divorce 3 years ago, took Richard for everything he had. Rachel remembered the Brennan divorce. It had been spectacular and messy, dominating the society pages for months. Richard Brennan had been convinced his wife would settle quietly. Instead, Catherine Morrison had systematically dismantled his credibility while securing Eleanor a settlement that included 3 properties and 40% of his investment portfolio. Send me her information, Rachel said. The front door opened. Daniel. He looked like he hadn't slept, still wearing his tuck shirt from the night before, though the bow tie was gone and the collar hung open. His eyes found Rachel immediately, and the rage in them was palpable. Kids, go upstairs, Rachel said quietly. Emma and Jake, sensing the tension, disappeared without argument. Rachel's mother stood. I should stay, Rachel said. Please. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. This wasn't a conversation he wanted witnesses for, but Rachel was done accommodating his preferences. What the hell was that last night? His voice was low, controlled, but shaking with fury. Do you have any idea what you've done? I attended a gala. Exercised my right as your spouse to be present at a company event. You humiliated me, in front of Marcus, the entire board, our investors. He ran a hand through his hair. Vanessa was mortified. Was she? Rachel's tone was mild. How unfortunate for her. This isn't funny, Rachel. You've jeopardized my career, my reputation. Your reputation? The laugh that escaped Rachel was sharp and humorless. You brought your assistant to a couple's event instead of your wife, and somehow I'm the one who damaged your reputation? I explained to you why Vanessa needed to be there. This was about business. No, Daniel, this was about control. Rachel set down her coffee mug with deliberate care. You wanted to see how far you could push, how much humiliation I'd accept, whether I'd actually let you parade your replacement in front of everyone while I stayed home like a good little wife. Replacement? Daniel's laugh was ugly. Jesus, you're paranoid. Vanessa is my assistant, my colleague. The colleague you touch constantly. The one you compare me to every chance you get. The one whose opinion apparently matters more than your wife's existence. You did. Constantly. Rachel's voice didn't rise, but it cut clean. For months, maybe years. Every comment about her intelligence, her style, her value. Every observation about my inadequacy. You were writing me out of the narrative of your life, Daniel. I just chose to stop playing along. He stared at her like she was speaking a foreign language. I don't understand what's gotten into you. Clarity, Rachel smiled, and self-respect. You need help, Rachel. Professional help. This kind of behavior, this paranoia. I've already contacted a lawyer. Rachel watched his face change, saw the calculation replace the anger. I'm filing for divorce. You'll receive the papers this week. The silence stretched between them like broken glass. You can't be serious. Daniel's voice had changed, become almost reasonable. Think about the kids, Rachel. Think about what you're throwing away. I am thinking about the kids. I'm thinking about what I'm teaching Emma about a woman's worth. What I'm showing Jake about how men should treat their partners. Rachel stood, bringing herself to her full height. And I'm not throwing anything away. You already did that. This is insane. Daniel turned to Rachel's mother, clearly hoping for an ally. Tell her she's being irrational. Get out of my daughter's house, Rachel's mother said quietly. My house, Daniel corrected. My name is on the deed. Our house, Rachel said. Community property, remember? But you're welcome to leave. I'll be sure to change the locks. Daniel's mask cracked completely. You think you can survive without me? You have no job, no income, no prospects. Who's going to hire a 40-year-old interior designer who hasn't worked in almost a decade? There it was. The truth he'd been dancing around for years. His power came from making her believe she needed him, that without his money, his status, his grudging approval, she was nothing. "I guess we'll find out," Rachel said. He left. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. Rachel's hands were shaking again, but this time from adrenaline rather than fear. Her mother pulled her into a hug that smelled like the lavender perfume she'd worn since Rachel was a child. "You were magnificent," she whispered. Emma appeared at the top of the stairs. "Is Daddy coming back?" Rachel looked at her daughter's worried face and made a choice. No more lies. No more pretending. "Not to live here, sweetheart. Daddy and I are going to live in different houses from now on." "Because of the fighting?" "Because sometimes people are better apart than together." Jake emerged behind his sister, clutching his favorite stuffed elephant. At 6, he was old enough to sense change, but young enough to accept it more easily. "Can we still see Daddy?" "Of course, Daddy loves you both very much. This is between him and me, not between him and you." It was a version of the truth. Daniel did love the children in his limited capacity. He just loved control more. Monday morning, Rachel called Catherine Morrison's office. The receptionist scheduled her for Wednesday at 10. Tuesday, she drove to the bank and opened her own account, transferring half the balance from their joint savings. It was her legal right, but it still felt like theft. Stealing back pieces of herself Daniel had convinced her belonged to him. Wednesday, Catherine Morrison's office was everything Rachel expected: sleek, modern, intimidating. Catherine herself was 50-something with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Tell me everything," she said after the preliminaries were handled. So Rachel did. 7 years condensed into 45 minutes. The erosion of her career, the constant criticism, the isolation from friends, the Gala. Catherine took notes on a legal pad, her expression never changing. When Rachel finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "How much documentation do you have?" "Documentation?" "Text messages, emails, witnesses to his behavior." Catherine's gaze was sharp. "Emotional abuse is harder to prove than financial malfeasance, but it's not impossible." "I have some texts, mostly about household things, but the tone is there." "Social media?" Rachel thought about the Instagram account she barely maintained, pictures of the kids, occasional landscapes, nothing about her marriage except the carefully curated anniversary post Daniel insisted on. Not much. "What about financial records? Do you know what he earns?" "Roughly. He's a partner at Meridian Holdings. Base salary around $300,000 plus bonuses and equity." Catherine's pen moved across the legal pad. "Assets?" "The house, 2 cars, his 401k, some stocks, I think, but I don't have access to the accounts." "We'll get access." "Discovery is a beautiful thing." Catherine looked up. "Here's what you need to understand, Rachel. Your husband is going to fight this. Men like Daniel Hart don't give up control easily. He'll paint you as unstable. He'll minimize his assets and maximize your contributions to the marriage's failure. He'll use your lack of recent employment against you." "I know." "Good, because the next few months are going to be ugly. But if you're willing to stand firm, if you're willing to document everything and refuse to be intimidated, we can get you a settlement that reflects your actual contributions to this marriage and sets you up for financial independence." Rachel thought about the woman who'd walked into that ballroom 5 days ago, the one who'd spoken her truth in front of 300 witnesses. "I'm willing," she said. Catherine smiled. It was the smile of a predator who'd just spotted prey. "Then let's get to work." The paperwork was filed Thursday. By Friday afternoon, Daniel had been served. His response came via text at 3:47 p.m. "You're making a mistake. Think about what this will do to the kids." Rachel didn't respond. An hour later, "I'm willing to forget about the scene at the gala if you withdraw the papers." Still nothing. 6 p.m. "You won't get a dime from me. I'll tie this up in court for years." Rachel blocked his number and poured herself a glass of wine. Saturday, Mia showed up with takeout and champagne. "Tell me everything," she demanded, sprawling on Rachel's couch like she owned it. Rachel recounted the week, the confrontation with Daniel, the lawyer meeting, the filing. "You're my hero," Mia said seriously. "Do you know that?" Watching you reclaim yourself has been like watching someone come back from the dead. I don't feel heroic, I feel terrified. Good. That means you're doing something real. Mia refilled their glasses. Speaking of which, Robert Lindquist is serious about that headquarters renovation. He emailed me asking for your contact information. Rachel's stomach fluttered. What did you tell him? That you'd reach out directly. But Rachel, this project is huge. 15 floors, unlimited budget, total creative control. It's the kind of project that could relaunch your entire career. I haven't designed anything in 7 years. So? You haven't forgotten how. It's like riding a bike, except the bike costs $40 million and could make you relevant again. Rachel looked at her friend. What if I'm not good anymore? What if you're better? Mia's expression was fierce. You've spent 7 years learning to read people, to understand what they need, to make invisible things visible. That's design, Rachel. That's always been design. Monday morning, Rachel emailed Robert Lindquist. His response came within an hour. Can you meet Tuesday at 2 p.m.? I'd love to show you the space. She stared at the email for 10 minutes before responding. I'll be there. The Lindquist Capitol building occupied an entire city block downtown. Robert met her in the lobby, all charm and enthusiasm. Rachel, thank you for coming. He shook her hand warmly. I've been following your career since the Coastal Ridge project. When I saw you at that gala, he stopped, recalibrating. Well, let's just say I was impressed. They toured all 15 floors. The space was dated. Lots of gray cubicles and fluorescent lighting, the aesthetic equivalent of corporate depression. We want something different, Robert explained as they stood in what would be the executive suite. Something that reflects who we are as a company. Innovative, forward-thinking, human. Rachel's mind was already working, seeing through the tired infrastructure to the possibility underneath. What's your timeline? Flexible. 6 months for design, another year for implementation. But I need a designer who understands vision. Someone who can translate abstract values into concrete space. And you think I'm that person? Robert looked at her directly. I know you are. The question is, are you ready to prove it? Rachel thought about Daniel's text. You have no prospects. She smiled. When do we start? The contract arrived Wednesday. Rachel read every word before signing. Catherine reviewed it, declared it fair, and Rachel officially became a working designer again. The news spread quickly. By Friday, 3 more potential clients had reached out. A restaurant renovation, a boutique hotel redesign, a private residence in the suburbs. You're going to need help, Mia said when Rachel called to share the news. You can't handle 4 major projects solo. I don't even have an office. So get one. Hire staff. Rebuild what you should have had all along. Rachel felt panic rising. I don't know if I can... Rachel. Mia's voice was firm. Stop. You're not that woman anymore. The one who second-guesses herself. The one who needs permission to succeed. You walked into that ballroom and burned down your old life. Don't rebuild it. Build something better. She was right. Rachel knew she was right. Help me hire? Rachel asked. I thought you'd never ask. By the end of the month, Rachel had leased office space in a converted warehouse downtown, hired 2 junior designers fresh out of graduate school, and begun preliminary sketches for the Lindquist project. She worked 16-hour days, fueled by coffee and the intoxicating rush of creating again. The muscle memory came back slowly at first, then faster, her hand moving across the drafting table with remembered confidence, her eye-catching spatial relationships she'd trained herself to see years ago. Emma and Jake adjusted to the new rhythm. Rachel's mother helped with pickups and dinners. The kids had questions. Where was Daddy living? When would they see him? Why did everything feel different? But Rachel answered honestly without weaponizing the truth. Daniel had moved into a downtown apartment. His visitation with the children was awkward and performative, more about maintaining appearances than genuine connection. He brought expensive gifts and made promises about trips they'd take, then canceled last-minute citing work obligations. Daddy seems sad, Emma observed after one such visit. Probably because his life is changing, Rachel said carefully. That's hard for everyone. Are you sad? Rachel considered the question. Was she sad? The marriage was ending. 7 years were dissolving into legal documents and asset division. She was rebuilding a career from scratch while managing 2 children and facing an uncertain financial future. "No," she said, and realized it was true. "I'm not sad. I'm free." The divorce proceeded with agonizing slowness. Daniel's lawyer, a shark named Mitchell Pemberton, who'd made a career of protecting wealthy men from their ex-wives, filed motion after motion. Requests for Rachel's employment history, demands for psychological evaluation, claims that her erratic behavior at the gala demonstrated instability. Catherine batted them down methodically. "He's trying to exhaust you," she explained during one of their weekly strategy sessions. "Make you desperate enough to settle for less. Standard playbook." "What do we do?" "We wait, and we document." Catherine slid a folder across her desk. "I need you to keep a log. Every interaction with Daniel, every missed visit with the kids, every text, email, phone call, dates, times, content. You think you'll give me ammunition?" "Men like your husband always do. They can't help themselves." She was right. Within 2 weeks, Rachel's log included 14 entries. Daniel showing up unannounced and demanding entry to his house. Daniel sending emails at 2 a.m. claiming she was poisoning the children against him. Daniel calling Emma's school to complain about decisions Rachel had made without consulting him. Each entry was a small piece of evidence. Each documented interaction, another nail in the coffin of his credibility. The preliminary settlement offer arrived in November. Catherine called Rachel to her office to review it. "He's offering you the house, $50,000 in cash, and $1,500 a month in child support," Catherine said flatly. "No alimony, no division of his retirement accounts, no acknowledgement of your career sacrifice or contribution to his professional advancement." Rachel stared at the numbers. The house had a mortgage of $300,000. The child support barely covered Emma's orthodontist bills and Jake's tutoring. "He's insulting you," Catherine continued. "This offer is designed to make you feel worthless, to prove that you need him more than he needs you." "What should we counter with?" Catherine's smile was sharp. "Everything he's afraid to lose." The counteroffer was surgical. Half of Daniel's retirement accounts, half of his Meridian equity, alimony of $3,000 a month for 5 years, enough time for Rachel to fully reestablish her career. Primary custody of the children with a structured visitation schedule Daniel would actually have to honor. "He'll never agree to this," Rachel said. "He will, eventually. Because if he forces us to go to trial, I'll subpoena every email, every text, every witness to his treatment of you. I'll put Vanessa Clark on the stand and ask her under oath about the nature of her relationship with a married man. I'll make sure every detail of his character becomes public record." Rachel thought about Daniel's obsession with image, his carefully constructed reputation, the professional persona he'd spent years building. "You'd destroy him," she said quietly. "Only if he makes me." Catherine's expression was neutral. "But he needs to believe I will. That's how negotiation works." Daniel's response to the counteroffer came via Mitchell Pemberton, who called Catherine directly. "Your client is being unreasonable," he said, loud enough that Rachel could hear him through the phone on speaker. "Your client is being cheap," Catherine replied, "and delusional if he thinks we'll accept an offer that treats a 7-year marriage like a college hookup." Mr. Hart contributed the majority of the household income, while Mrs. Hart sacrificed her career to support his advancement and raise their children. "The law recognizes non-financial contributions, Mitchell. You know that." "This is going to get ugly." "It already is ugly. Your client made sure of that when he brought his assistant to a couples event instead of his wife. But if you want to make it uglier, we're happy to oblige." The call ended. Catherine looked at Rachel with satisfaction. Now we wait for him to panic. The panic came 3 days later, though not in the form Rachel expected. She was working late at her new office when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. "Rachel Hart?" A woman's voice, young, uncertain. "Yes?" "This is Vanessa Clark. I think we should talk." Rachel stared at her phone, Vanessa's number still displayed on the screen. The silence stretched between them, heavy with years of manipulation and months of careful legal maneuvering that could be destroyed in a single conversation. "Why should I believe anything you say?" Rachel asked finally. "You shouldn't." Vanessa's honesty was unexpected. I've given you every reason not to trust me. But I'm calling anyway because staying silent makes me complicit, and I can't live with that anymore." Rachel glanced at the clock on her office wall. 7:45. Emma and Jake would be getting ready for bed. Her mother would be reading them stories, maintaining the routine Rachel had worked so hard to establish since the separation. "I'm listening," Rachel said, though everything in her screamed to hang up. "Can we meet? Just for coffee." 30 minutes. Vanessa's voice carried an urgency that sounded genuine, though Rachel had learned not to trust her instincts when it came to Daniel's world. "Please, there are things you need to know before the settlement negotiations continue." Rachel thought about Catherine's warnings, about how every interaction could be twisted, weaponized, turned into evidence. But she also thought about the look on Vanessa's face at the gala when Rachel had spoken her truth, the shock, the recognition, the beginning of understanding. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m., the coffee shop on 5th and Madison," Rachel said. "If you're even 1 minute late, I'm gone." "I'll be there. And Rachel, thank you." After hanging up, Rachel sat in the quiet of her office, surrounded by the preliminary sketches for the Lindquist project. The designs were good, she knew that objectively, but doubt crept in anyway. The familiar voice that sounded suspiciously like Daniel whispering that she was fooling herself, that she'd been away too long, that real designers didn't take 7-year breaks to raise children. She called Catherine immediately. "Absolutely not," her lawyer said before Rachel finished explaining. "This is exactly the kind of thing Daniel's team would orchestrate. Get you alone with Vanessa, record you saying something they can use, claim you're harassing witnesses or attempting to influence testimony. What if she genuinely wants to help? Then she can help by giving a sworn statement to my office with her attorney present, not by having secret coffee meetings with my client." Catherine's tone softened slightly. "Rachel, I know you want to believe people are fundamentally good. That's one of your best qualities. But Daniel has spent months constructing a legal strategy designed to paint you as unstable and vindictive. Don't hand him ammunition." Rachel knew Catherine was right. The smart move was to refuse the meeting, maintain boundaries, let the legal process unfold without introducing unpredictable variables. She also knew she was going to the coffee shop anyway. "If I record the entire conversation on my phone, would that protect me?" Rachel asked. Catherine sighed deeply. "You're going regardless of what I say, aren't you?" "I think I need to hear what she has to say." "Fine. Record everything. Keep the conversation in a public place. Don't make any statements about Daniel, the settlement, or the divorce proceedings. If she asks questions about any of those topics, deflect. And Rachel, if this goes sideways, don't say I didn't warn you." That night, Rachel lay awake thinking about all the ways the meeting could be a trap. Vanessa could be wearing a wire, feeding information back to Daniel and Mitchell Pemberton. She could be recording the conversation herself, planning to edit it into something incriminating. She could simply be gathering intelligence about Rachel's state of mind, her vulnerabilities, her plans. Or she could be exactly what she claimed to be, a young woman who'd been manipulated by a powerful man and was trying to find her way back to integrity. Rachel arrived at the coffee shop at 9:45 the next morning. She chose a table by the window with a clear view of the entrance and started her phone's recording app before setting it casually on the table between the sugar packets and napkin dispenser. Vanessa walked in at 9:58. She looked different than she had at any of their previous encounters. The polished armor was gone, replaced by jeans and a simple sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she wasn't wearing makeup. Without the professional veneer, she looked younger, more uncertain. "Thank you for coming," Vanessa said as she sat down, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she'd ordered at the counter. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't." Rachel kept her voice neutral, giving nothing away. Vanessa took a breath, as if preparing to jump off a cliff. "Everything Daniel told me about your marriage was a lie. I need you to know that I believe you now. About all of it. What changed your mind?" "I saw the texts he fabricated. The ones he claimed were from you, discussing the separation that never happened." Vanessa pulled out her phone and opened her photos. "He left his laptop open in the office last week. I found a folder labeled Personal Documents and couldn't help myself. Inside were drafts of text conversations, multiple versions, refined over time, designed to look authentic." She turned the phone toward Rachel. The screen showed a document titled Conversation with Rachel, Draft 3, followed by a carefully constructed dialogue that painted a picture of a wife eager to end her marriage, practically pushing her husband toward a younger woman. Rachel felt ice slide down her spine. The sophistication of the manipulation was breathtaking. Daniel hadn't just lied to Vanessa. He'd created evidence to support his lies, building a false reality so detailed it could fool anyone who wasn't looking for cracks. There were other documents too, Vanessa continued quietly. Emails he never sent but drafted to show hypothetical lawyers. Financial records with altered dates. A timeline of your erratic behavior that I now realize was completely fabricated. Her voice cracked. I was so stupid. I believed everything he told me because I wanted to believe it. Because being the woman a successful, powerful man chose felt like validation. You weren't stupid. You were targeted. Rachel heard her own voice saying the words and felt surprised by the compassion in them. Daniel is exceptionally good at finding people's vulnerabilities and exploiting them. He did it to me for 7 years. Why would 8 months with you be any different? Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. Because I should have known better. I have an MBA from a top program. I'm supposed to be smart enough to see through manipulation. But he made me feel special, important, like I was the only person who really understood him. Rachel recognized the pattern because she'd lived it. The initial idealization, the gradual isolation from other perspectives, the creation of a shared reality that existed only in the manipulator's imagination. What made you finally see the truth? Rachel asked. The Gala. Watching you walk in and speak your truth in front of everyone. Vanessa wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. The way Daniel reacted, the panic, the immediate need to control the narrative, the rage underneath his composed exterior. I realized I was seeing the real him for the first time, and I was terrified because I understood that if I stepped out of line, if I stopped being useful to him, that rage would turn toward me. The coffee shop buzzed with morning activity around them. People ordering lattes, typing on laptops, having normal conversations about normal lives. Rachel felt suspended between two realities. The one where she was rebuilding her life with clarity and purpose, and the one where Daniel's manipulation extended far beyond what she'd imagined. Why are you telling me this now? Rachel kept her voice low, aware that every word was being recorded. Because his lawyers are preparing to depose me next week. They're going to ask about my relationship with Daniel, about the Gala, about everything that happened before and after. Mitchell Pemberton called me yesterday and spent an hour coaching me on what to say. Rachel's pulse quickened. What did he tell you to say? That you've always been unstable. That Daniel mentioned your erratic behavior and mood swings long before the separation. That I witnessed you being cruel to him at office functions, undermining him in front of colleagues. Vanessa's hands shook slightly around her teacup. He wants me to paint you as a vengeful wife trying to destroy a good man's reputation because you can't accept that the marriage failed. And are you going to say those things? No. Vanessa's voice was firm. I'm going to tell the truth. All of it. The fabricated texts, the manufactured timeline, the coaching from Daniel's legal team. I'm going to burn down every lie he's built. Rachel felt something shift in her chest. Hope, maybe, or relief. The knowledge that she wasn't alone in understanding Daniel's capacity for deception. That's going to destroy your career, Rachel said quietly. Daniel will make sure you never work in corporate finance again. He'll paint you as a disgruntled employee, someone who fabricated evidence because he rejected your advances. Your reputation will be demolished. I know, but Vanessa smiled, and it was sad but genuine. I've thought about nothing else for the past week. But I keep coming back to the same conclusion. I'm 26 years old. I have time to rebuild my career. You spent 7 years in a cage Daniel built. The least I can do is help break the lock. Rachel wanted to warn her about the cost, about how Daniel's vindictiveness would follow her for years, about how the professional world was smaller than Vanessa imagined, and men like Daniel had long memories and longer reach. But she also remembered standing in that ballroom, speaking truth despite knowing the consequences. Sometimes courage required accepting the price. My lawyer will want to talk to you, Rachel said. Officially, on the record. Are you prepared for that? I am. I've already contacted my own attorney. She's advising me through this. Vanessa reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. Laura Chen, She specializes in employment law and whistleblower cases. She thinks I have grounds to sue Daniel and Meridian for creating a hostile work environment. Rachel looked at the card, then back at Vanessa. You're really doing this. I'm really doing this. Vanessa stood, leaving her barely touched tea on the table. I need to go. My attorney said to keep this conversation brief. But Rachel, I'm sorry for all of it, for not seeing through him sooner, for being part of your humiliation, even unintentionally. You deserved better. After Vanessa left, Rachel sat for a long moment processing everything she'd just heard. The fabricated texts, the coached testimony, the extent of Daniel's willingness to construct false realities. She called Catherine from the parking lot. Vanessa Clark just became our most valuable witness, Rachel said without preamble, and possibly Daniel's worst nightmare. Over the next week, Vanessa provided Catherine with everything she'd discovered, the drafts of fabricated conversations, the manufactured timeline, the coaching notes from Mitchell Pemberton. She also provided documentation of Daniel billing personal expenses to Meridian accounts, claiming Vanessa's work as his own on client projects, and creating a pattern of behavior that violated multiple company policies. Catherine assembled everything into a filing that she sent to Mitchell Pemberton on a Friday afternoon with a simple cover letter. Your client has engaged in fraud, witness tampering, and fabrication of evidence. These documents will be submitted to the court on Monday morning unless we receive a revised settlement offer that reflects Mrs. Hart's actual contributions to the marriage and Mr. Hart's systematic abuse. You have 48 hours. Mitchell Pemberton called 90 minutes later. Your client is blackmailing my client with stolen documents, he said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. My client had coffee with a young woman who voluntarily shared information about your client's illegal activities, Catherine replied calmly. Nothing was stolen. Everything was freely given. And blackmail is such an ugly word, Mitchell. I prefer presenting evidence of material fraud in divorce proceedings. If you submit this, I'll have Vanessa Clark charged with theft of proprietary information. Please do. I'm sure the discovery process will be fascinating. We'll get to subpoena all of Daniel's communications, all of Meridian's HR files, and all of your coaching notes. The press will have a field day. Silence on the other end. Rachel, listening on speakerphone in Catherine's office, could almost hear the calculations happening. Mitchell Pemberton was a shark, but he was also smart enough to know when his client was drowning. What does she want? Mitchell asked finally. Catherine smiled. Everything she's entitled to. And an apology, though I suspect that's asking too much. The revised settlement offer arrived Sunday evening. Rachel read through it with Catherine in a conference room that smelled like stale coffee and old law books. The house, transferred entirely to Rachel's name, with Daniel assuming the remaining mortgage payments. $300,000 in cash. Half of Daniel's retirement accounts and Meridian equity. $5,000 a month in alimony for 7 years. Primary custody of Emma and Jake, with structured visitation that Daniel would have to follow or face contempt charges. It was more than Rachel had asked for, more than she'd imagined possible. He's capitulating completely, Catherine said, scanning the document. He knows if this goes to trial, the fabricated evidence will destroy him. Not just in the divorce, but potentially criminally. Fabricating evidence is a crime. What about Vanessa? Is she protected? There's a clause here. Catherine pointed to a section near the end. Daniel agrees not to pursue legal action against Vanessa Clark in exchange for her not filing a hostile workplace lawsuit against him or Meridian. It's mutual assured destruction dressed up as settlement language. Rachel thought about the young woman who'd walked into that coffee shop looking terrified but determined. Make sure she gets a copy of this. I want her to know she's safe. Already done. Her attorney has been copied on everything. Rachel stared at the settlement documents, at the legal language that would finally end her marriage and secure her future. 7 years compressed into pages of whereas clauses and party obligations. Do I sign it? She asked quietly. That depends. Do you want to keep fighting? Because we can. We have enough evidence now to bury Daniel in court. We could push for more, make him pay for every lie, every manipulation, every moment of cruelty. Rachel thought about Emma asking if the divorce was her fault, about Jake's worried face when she explained that Daddy wouldn't be living at home anymore, about the life she was trying to build. the one focused on creation rather than destruction. "No," she said. "I want to be done. I want to move forward without Daniel defining my story anymore." "Then yes, sign it." Rachel signed her name on the final page, the pen moving across paper with a finality that felt like freedom. Catherine witnessed the signature, and just like that, 7 years of marriage became a legally binding dissolution. "How do you feel?" Catherine asked. Rachel considered the question. How did she feel? Relieved, certainly. Exhausted from months of legal maneuvering. Anxious about the future and single parenthood and rebuilding a career from scratch. But underneath all of that was something else. Something that felt like the first full breath after years of holding herself small enough to fit into Daniel's vision of who she should be. "Free," Rachel said. "I feel free." The settlement was finalized within 2 weeks. Daniel signed without contest, probably grateful to avoid a trial that would expose everything Vanessa had documented. Rachel received the first alimony payment and the cash settlement, numbers in her bank account that represented both an ending and a beginning. She used part of the money to hire her first employee, Sarah Chen, the project manager who'd been working freelance. Then she hired a recent graduate from the design school she'd attended, a young woman with innovative ideas about sustainable materials and adaptive reuse. Rachel Hart Interior Design became official. She registered the business, opened a commercial account, ordered business cards that listed her as principal designer. The title felt foreign at first, like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. But gradually, as clients started responding to her pitches and projects moved from concept to implementation, it began to feel real. She was building something that belonged entirely to her. The Lindquist Capital project consumed most of October and November. Rachel spent hours on site, working directly with contractors to solve problems as they emerged. A structural beam that couldn't be moved required redesigning the entire fourth-floor layout. The original lighting plan didn't account for afternoon sun patterns, necessitating a complete revision. Budget constraints meant finding creative solutions that maintained design integrity while cutting costs. Rachel loved every challenging moment of it. This was the work she'd been born to do, the problem-solving, the collaboration, the transformation of space into something that served human needs. She'd forgotten how good she was at reading a room, understanding how people would move through it, anticipating needs before they became problems. "You're in your element," Mia observed one afternoon, watching Rachel sketch revised elevations for the executive suite. "I haven't seen you this alive in years." "I forgot what it felt like," Rachel admitted, "to be good at something, to have people trust my judgment instead of questioning my competence." "Daniel really did a number on you." Rachel looked up from her sketches. "He did, but I'm starting to realize that his campaign to make me doubt myself says more about him than it ever did about me. Confident people don't need to destroy their partners to feel powerful." Mia smiled. "Look at you, all psychologically aware. Therapy's working." Rachel had started seeing Dr. Michelle Gordon twice a week in September. The sessions were painful, excavating years of internalized criticism, examining the ways she'd participated in her own diminishment, learning to recognize manipulation patterns so she'd never fall into them again. But they were also necessary, because Rachel was discovering that leaving Daniel wasn't enough. She also had to leave behind the version of herself that had accepted his treatment as normal. "Doctor, Gordon says I have a tendency to prioritize other people's comfort over my own survival," Rachel said. "Apparently that's common in people who've experienced long-term emotional abuse. What are you doing about it?" "Practicing saying no, setting boundaries, recognizing that other people's anger at my boundaries is their problem, not mine." It sounded simple when summarized like that. The reality was harder. Rachel still found herself apologizing automatically when someone seemed displeased, still caught herself minimizing her own needs to avoid conflict, still heard Daniel's voice in her head cataloging her inadequacies. But she was learning to recognize those patterns and choose differently, slowly, imperfectly, with lots of backsliding and moments of doubt. The work of undoing 7 years of conditioning couldn't be rushed. Emma's 10th birthday fell on a Saturday in November. Rachel threw her a party at a ceramics studio where kids could paint their own pottery. 15 of Emma's classmates showed up, along with Mia and Rachel's mother. Daniel was supposed to come. He'd confirmed the day before, promised he wouldn't miss it. He didn't show up. Rachel watched Emma's face carefully monitor the door for the first hour, hope dimming incrementally each time it opened to reveal someone other than her father. By the time they sang happy birthday, Emma had stopped looking. "He's not coming, is he?" Emma asked quietly, while the other kids were picking up their painted pieces. Rachel wanted to make excuses, to protect her daughter from the pain of recognizing her father's unreliability. But Dr. Gordon had been clear. Children needed truth more than they needed protection from disappointment. "No, sweetheart, he's not." Did he forget? I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe something came up that he thought was more important. Rachel knelt down to Emma's eye level. "But here's what I do know. You are worth showing up for. His failure to do that is about him, not about you." Emma nodded, but tears spilled down her cheeks anyway. Rachel held her daughter while she cried, feeling her own anger at Daniel crystallize into something harder and colder than anything she'd felt during the divorce proceedings. He could manipulate her. He could destroy her career and her confidence. He could fabricate evidence and weaponize the legal system. But hurting their children was a line Rachel wouldn't forgive. She called him that night after the kids were asleep. "You missed Emma's birthday party," she said without preamble. "Something came up at work. I'll make it up to her." "No, you won't. Because you never do, Daniel. You promise and cancel. You commit and disappear. You're teaching our daughter that the people who claim to love her can't be counted on." "Don't be dramatic, Rachel. It was one party. It was her 10th birthday. And this is the third time in 2 months you've canceled plans with the kids. Either show up for them consistently or stop making promises you won't keep." Daniel's voice turned cold. "You're alienating them from me, turning them against their father." "I don't have to turn them against you. You're doing that all by yourself." Rachel felt the anger she'd been suppressing for months finally break free. "I spent 7 years making excuses for you. Explaining away your cruelty as stress. Accepting your manipulation as normal. But I won't do it anymore, and I won't teach our children to do it either." "Careful, Rachel. Our custody agreement requires cooperative co-parenting." "Then cooperate. Be a parent. Show up when you say you will, or accept that Emma and Jake will learn they can't trust you." She hung up before he could respond. Her hands were shaking, adrenaline flooding her system the way it always did after confronting Daniel. But underneath the physical response was something new, satisfaction. She'd set a boundary and held it. She'd told the truth without apologizing or softening it to protect his feelings. Dr. Gordon would be proud. The following week, Rachel received an email from Marcus Whitmore at Meridian Holdings. "I'd like to discuss a potential project with you. Can we schedule a meeting?" Rachel stared at the email for a long moment. Meridian was Daniel's firm. The place where he'd built his career, where his colleagues had witnessed his treatment of her, where his professional reputation still mattered. Taking a project there felt dangerous, like walking back into the lion's den she'd barely escaped. But it also felt like reclaiming territory, like refusing to be exiled from professional opportunities because her ex-husband happened to work there. She scheduled the meeting for the following Tuesday. Marcus Whitmore's office occupied the top floor of Meridian's headquarters building, all glass walls and minimalist furniture and carefully curated art. He stood when Rachel entered, offering a handshake and a smile that seemed genuine. "Thank you for coming, Rachel. I know this might be awkward given your history with Daniel." "It's fine," Rachel lied. "I want to be direct. Meridian is planning a major renovation of our satellite office in the financial district. 5 floors, complete redesign. I've been reviewing portfolios from various firms, and your work on the Coastal Ridge development keeps coming to mind." Rachel's pulse quickened. That was almost 8 years ago. Good design doesn't have an expiration date, and frankly, I'm more interested in your recent work. The Lindquist Capital project has been getting attention in the industry press. Robert speaks very highly of your vision and execution. Robert is generous with his praise. Robert is honest. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying Rachel. "I'm going to be blunt. I know what Daniel did to you. I watched it happen for years and said nothing, which makes me complicit. When I saw you at that gala, speaking your truth in front of everyone." He paused. "It forced me to examine my own role in perpetuating environments where talented women are diminished to protect fragile men's egos." Rachel wasn't sure how to respond. Apologies from men who'd enabled Daniel's behavior felt performative, but Marcus seemed genuinely troubled. I'm offering you this project because you're the best person for it, Marcus continued. But I'm also offering it because I want Meridian to be the kind of company that values talent over politics. That promotes based on merit rather than who's married to whom, and that requires me to start making different choices. What about Daniel? He still works here. Daniel is currently under internal review for irregularities in his expense reporting. That's confidential, but I wanted you to know that his position here is not as secure as he might believe. Rachel thought about the documents Vanessa had provided, the evidence of billing fraud and stolen credit. It seemed Daniel's house of cards was collapsing from multiple directions simultaneously. If I take this project, it can't be because you feel guilty about enabling my ex-husband, Rachel said carefully. It has to be because you believe I'm the right designer for the work. It's both, Marcus said honestly. I do feel guilty, and I do believe you're the right designer. Those things can coexist. Rachel looked around the office, at the city visible through floor-to-ceiling windows. This was the world Daniel had inhabited while she'd been home managing playdates and grocery shopping. The world he'd implied she wasn't sophisticated enough to navigate. Taking this project would mean proving she belonged here on her own merit. That Daniel's assessment of her professional capabilities had been wrong. Send me the project brief, Rachel said. I'll put together a proposal. Marcus smiled. Excellent. And Rachel? Welcome back. Well, walking out of Meridian Holdings that afternoon, Rachel felt something shift inside her. She wasn't running from Daniel's shadow anymore. She was stepping directly into spaces he'd tried to claim as exclusively his own and proving she belonged there just as much, if not more. The proposal took her 2 weeks to develop. She poured everything she'd learned over the past months into it, the spatial understanding she'd never lost, the fresh perspective that came from years away, the human-centered approach she'd developed through therapy and self-reflection. She submitted it on a Monday morning and tried not to obsess about the outcome. The response came Wednesday. Your proposal is exactly what we're looking for. When can you start? Rachel read the email 3 times before believing it was real. Then she called Mia. I got the Meridian project, she said, still slightly stunned. Mia's scream of joy was loud enough that Rachel had to pull the phone away from her ear. I'm taking you to dinner, the expensive place downtown. We're celebrating. That night, sitting across from her best friend in a restaurant where the wine list had prices that would have terrified her 6 months ago, Rachel felt the full weight of how far she'd come. You did it, Mia said, raising her glass. You rebuilt your career from nothing in less than a year. You're officially a phoenix. Emma called me that, Rachel said, a phoenix rising from the ashes. Smart kid. She gets it from her mom. Rachel thought about Emma's birthday party, about Jake's worried questions about when they'd see Daddy next, about the complex reality of rebuilding life while co-parenting with someone actively trying to undermine you. I don't feel like I'm rising most days, Rachel admitted. I feel like I'm barely surviving, like I'm one crisis away from falling apart. That's what resilience looks like from the inside, Mia said gently. From the outside, you look unstoppable. But I know it's hard work every single day. It was. Every morning, Rachel had to actively choose strength over fear, progress over safety, truth over the comfortable lies she could tell herself about Daniel's capacity for change. But she was choosing. That was the difference between who she'd been a year ago and who she was becoming. The woman who'd stood silently at corporate events while Daniel talked over her wouldn't recognize the woman accepting major commercial projects and setting boundaries with her ex-husband. Rachel wasn't sure she recognized herself either, but she was learning to like this new version. This woman who spoke up, took up space, refused to apologize for her existence. To phoenixes, Rachel said, raising her glass, and the fires that forged them. They clinked glasses, and for the first time in 7 years, Rachel felt like the life she was building might actually be sustainable. Not easy, but hers. Entirely, authentically, unapologetically hers. And that made all the difference. Rachel's first instinct was to hang up. Her second was to record the conversation. Instead, she did neither. What do you want, Vanessa? There was a pause on the other end, the sound of traffic in the background. Vanessa was calling from outside, somewhere public. I need to tell you something about Daniel. I think I know enough about Daniel. No, you don't. Vanessa's voice cracked slightly. Can we meet? Just for coffee. 30 minutes. Every rational part of Rachel's brain screamed no. This was a trap, a manipulation. Daniel sending his proxy to gather information or deliver threats he couldn't make himself. But there was something in Vanessa's tone, something that sounded like fear. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., the coffee shop on 5th and Madison, Rachel said. If you're late, I'm gone. I'll be there. Rachel called Catherine immediately after hanging up. Don't go, her lawyer said flatly. It's a setup. She'll record you saying something Daniel can use, or she'll manufacture some story about you threatening her. What if she's genuine? Then she can talk to me, on the record, with a court reporter present. Catherine's tone left no room for argument. You're in the middle of divorce proceedings, Rachel. Every interaction is evidence. Every conversation is discoverable. You meet with your husband's assistant privately, and I guarantee it will come back to bite you. Rachel knew Catherine was right. She also knew she was going anyway. If I wear a wire, would that protect me? Catherine was quiet for a long moment. You're really doing this? I am. Fine. Record everything on your phone. Keep it in your pocket. Audio running. If she says anything threatening or tries to manipulate you, we'll have proof. But Rachel, be smart. Don't engage emotionally. Don't give her ammunition. The next morning, Rachel arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early. She ordered a latte she wouldn't drink and chose a table by the window where she could see Vanessa approaching. At exactly 10 a.m., Vanessa walked in. She looked different than she had at the gala. Smaller somehow, less polished. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore jeans and a sweater instead of her usual designer armor. Without the professional gloss, she looked younger, vulnerable. Rachel's recording app was already running. Vanessa ordered tea and sat down across from Rachel without preamble. Thank you for meeting me. You have 25 minutes left. Talk. Vanessa wrapped her hands around her mug, not drinking. I need to tell you what really happened, what's been happening, because if I don't, I'm going to... She stopped, composed herself. Daniel's been lying to you. About everything. That's not exactly news, Vanessa. No, I mean about us. About the gala. About why he brought me instead of you. Vanessa looked up, and her eyes were red-rimmed. He told me you two were separated, that you'd agreed to divorce months ago, but were waiting until after the holidays to tell the kids. He said you didn't want to attend company events anymore because it was too painful to pretend. Rachel felt something cold settle in her stomach. And you believed him? Why wouldn't I? He showed me texts between you two discussing the separation. He said you were the one who suggested he bring me to the gala so people wouldn't ask awkward questions about why he was alone. The manipulation was breathtaking. Daniel had constructed an entire false narrative, complete with manufactured evidence, to justify his behavior. And Vanessa, young and ambitious and eager to please her powerful boss, had accepted it as truth. Those texts were fabricated, Rachel said quietly. I know that now. Vanessa's voice broke. At the gala, when you walked in and confronted him, I realized I'd been played, that everything he'd told me was a lie, but by then it was too late. I'd already been complicit in humiliating you. Why are you telling me this now? Vanessa pulled out her phone and slid it across the table. On the screen was a text conversation between her and Daniel. Daniel, the divorce is getting ugly. Rachel's lawyer is trying to drag you into it. Vanessa, what? Why? Daniel, they're claiming we had an affair, that I brought you to the gala to flaunt our relationship. Vanessa, but we didn't have an affair. We never... Daniel, I know that. You know that. But her lawyer doesn't care about truth. They care about winning. They're going to subpoena you, put you on the stand, destroy your reputation to make me look bad. Vanessa, what should I do? Daniel, Mitchell Pemberton is going to reach out. He's my attorney. He'll prep you on what to say. But Vanessa, this is important. You cannot, under any circumstances, talk to Rachel or her lawyer without me present. They'll twist your words, make you look like a homewrecker. Your career will be over. The text continued in the same vein, Daniel positioning himself as Vanessa's protector while simultaneously ensuring she remained isolated and dependent on his version of events. He's terrified I'm going to tell the truth, Vanessa said, that I'm going to testify about how he manipulated both of us, how he's been using his position at Meridian to create this weird alternate reality where he's the victim. Rachel looked at the young woman across from her. Vanessa wasn't the enemy. She was another casualty of Daniel's need for control. Why come to me instead of his lawyer? Because I'm not going to lie for him anymore. Vanessa's voice was steady now, resolved. I've been thinking about that night at the gala, about the way you stood there and spoke your truth in front of everyone. You were terrifying and magnificent, and I realized I want to be that brave. Rachel thought about Catherine's warnings, about how this conversation could be twisted, weaponized, turned into evidence of collaboration or conspiracy. She also thought about the woman she'd been before that night, the one who'd let fear dictate every choice. If you testify, Rachel said carefully, Daniel will destroy you. He'll claim you pursued him, that you're lying to protect yourself. He'll make sure you never work in corporate finance again. I know. Vanessa's smile was sad. But I'm 26 years old. I have time to rebuild. You spent 7 years in a cage he built. I've only been trapped for 8 months. I can still get out. Rachel pulled out a business card and slid it across the table. That's my lawyer, Catherine Morrison. Call her. Tell her everything you told me. But Vanessa, be sure, once you do this, there's no going back. I'm sure. Vanessa stood, leaving her untouched tea on the table. And Rachel, I'm sorry for all of it. I should have questioned his story. I should have seen through him. I didn't, and you paid the price. We both did, Rachel said. After Vanessa left, Rachel sat for a long moment before calling Catherine. Please tell me you got that recorded, her lawyer said by way of greeting. Every word. Good, because Vanessa Clark just became our star witness. True to her word, Vanessa contacted Catherine that afternoon. By the end of the week, she'd provided a sworn statement detailing Daniel's deception, the fabricated texts, and his attempts to coach her testimony. She also turned over emails showing Daniel had been billing personal expenses to Meridian accounts and claiming Vanessa's work as his own in presentations to senior partners. Mitchell Pemberton called Catherine in a rage. Your client is suborning perjury from a disgruntled employee, he shouted. My client had coffee with a woman who wanted to clear her conscience, Catherine replied calmly. If Mr. Hart has been lying to his employer and fabricating evidence, that's a problem for him, not for us. You're destroying a man's career over a divorce settlement. No, Mitchell. Your client destroyed his own career by being a manipulative fraud. We're just documenting it. The revised settlement offer arrived 2 days later. The house transferred to Rachel's name with no mortgage. $200,000 in cash. Half of Daniel's retirement accounts and Meridian equity. $4,000 a month in alimony for 7 years. Primary custody of Emma and Jake with a structured visitation schedule that Daniel would actually have to honor or face contempt charges. He's capitulating, Catherine said when she called to review the offer. Everything we asked for, plus some concessions I wasn't expecting. What's the catch? Confidentiality clause. You can't discuss the terms of the settlement or the circumstances of the divorce publicly. Standard in cases like this where the husband wants to protect his reputation. Rachel thought about that, about being silenced again in a different way. What if I don't sign? Then we go to trial, which means months more of depositions, legal fees, and public scrutiny. It also means gambling that a judge will award you more than what's on the table right now. But I could talk. I could tell my story. Catherine was quiet for a moment. You could. But Rachel, think carefully. Your story is already out there. You told it at that gala in front of 300 witnesses. It spread through Daniel's professional circles, cost him credibility and respect. You've already won the public battle. The question is whether it's worth risking financial security to keep fighting a war you've already won. Rachel looked around her office, the space she'd built in 3 months. The preliminary designs for the Lindquist project spread across her drafting table, the life she was creating from the ashes of her marriage. I'll sign, she said, but I want one addition to the agreement. What's that? Daniel has to attend co-parenting counseling, professional court-mandated sessions focused on putting Emma and Jake's needs first. If he misses 3 sessions, I get sole custody. Catherine laughed. You're ruthless. I love it. The final settlement was signed in December, 3 days before Emma's 10th birthday. Rachel sat across from Daniel in a conference room at Catherine's office, while Mitchell Pemberton witnessed their signatures. Daniel looked like he'd aged 5 years in as many months. The confidence he'd worn like armor had cracked, revealing something smaller and meaner underneath. "You happy now?" he asked as they stood to leave. Rachel considered the question. Was she happy? The marriage was over, 7 years dissolved into legal documents. She had the house, financial security, and her children. She had a career that was rebuilding itself with startling momentum. "I'm free," she said. "That's better than happy." Outside the office, snow was starting to fall. Rachel walked to her car and sat for a moment, watching the flakes accumulate on the windshield. Her phone buzzed. A text from Robert Lindquist. "Board approved your Lindquist Capital Designs. When can you start implementation?" Another text, this one from Emma's school. "Emma selected for the Advanced Art program. She listed you as her inspiration. Congratulations." A third message from Mia. "Drinks tonight to celebrate your freedom? I'm buying." Rachel started the car and pulled into traffic. The city looked different in the snow, softer, full of possibility. At home, her mother had Emma and Jake in the kitchen making cookies. The house smelled like sugar and vanilla and something that felt dangerously close to peace. "Mom!" Jake launched himself at her legs. "We made snowflakes!" "I can see that." The kitchen table was covered in paper cutouts, each one unique and intricate. Emma looked up from the cookie dough she was rolling. "Are you okay?" Rachel realized she was crying, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of finally being able to exhale after holding her breath for 7 years. "I'm perfect, sweetheart. Absolutely perfect." That night, after the kids were asleep and her mother had gone home, Rachel stood in her bedroom, the one that was finally just hers, and looked at the woman in the mirror. She wasn't the same person who'd shrunk under Daniel's criticism. She also wasn't the same person who'd walked into that ballroom in a red dress, fueled by rage and champagne courage. She was someone new, someone who'd been broken down and chose to rebuild, someone who'd lost herself and fought to come back. The journey wasn't over. There would be hard days ahead, moments when she'd question her choices, times when the weight of single parenthood and career rebuilding would feel impossible. But she'd face the worst thing she could imagine, the dissolution of her identity, the systematic dismantling of her self-worth, and survived. More than survived, transformed. Rachel pulled out her phone and scrolled to the photos from the gala. Someone had captured the moment she'd walked into the ballroom, head high, red dress blazing. She looked at that woman and recognized her now, not as a performance, not as rebellion, but as the truth of who she'd always been underneath the years of conditioning and control. She sent the photo to Mia with a simple message. "Thank you for reminding me who I was." The response came immediately. "No, thank you for showing me who you're becoming." Rachel set down her phone and walked to the window. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering the city in white, erasing footprints, creating space for new paths. Tomorrow, she'd start implementation on the Lindquist project. She'd attend Emma's Advanced Art program orientation. She'd take Jake to his soccer evaluation. She'd meet with 2 new potential clients who'd reached out after word spread about her comeback. Tomorrow, she'd keep building. But tonight, she allowed herself something she hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not the kind that came from someone else's approval, not the kind that required external validation, but the quiet, fierce pride of someone who'd stared into the abyss of their own erasure and chosen to exist anyway. Rachel turned off the lights and climbed into bed, her bed, in her house, in the life she was creating. She fell asleep smiling. The weeks that followed took on a rhythm that felt foreign at first, then familiar. Rachel woke early, got the kids ready for school, and arrived at her office by 8:30. The Lindquist Capital project consumed her days. Meetings with contractors, consultations with the board, endless revisions to designs that were already strong but could always be stronger. She hired 3 more staff members. A project manager named Sarah Chen, who'd worked in corporate construction for 15 years. A CAD specialist fresh from graduate school with innovative ideas about sustainable materials. An office manager who kept everything running while Rachel focused on design. The small team operated out of the converted warehouse space with an efficiency that surprised even Rachel. She'd forgotten what it felt like to work with people who respected her vision instead of questioning her competence. In January, Marcus Whitmore called her directly. "Rachel, I need to speak with you about something sensitive," he said without preamble. Her stomach tightened. This was it. Whatever professional courtesy had protected her in the immediate aftermath of the divorce was about to evaporate. I'm listening. I've been reviewing Daniel's accounts at Meridian, specifically his expense reports and project attributions. Marcus's voice was carefully neutral. Some irregularities have come to light. Rachel thought about the emails Vanessa had provided, the billing fraud, the stolen credit for work. I see. I wanted you to know that we're conducting a formal investigation. Daniel's been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome. Why are you telling me this? Because the irregularities date back several years. Because some of the expenses were charged as household costs that benefited the family. Marcus paused. I need to know if you were aware of any of this. Rachel's mind raced. Daniel had controlled all their finances. She'd signed tax returns without reading them, trusted him to handle investments and expenses. Had she benefited from his fraud without knowing it? I wasn't aware, she said carefully. Daniel managed our financial accounts. I had access to the household checking, but not to his business expenses or income reporting. That's what I suspected, but I needed to hear it from you. Marcus's tone shifted, became almost gentle. Rachel, I owe you an apology. I watched Daniel treat you with contempt for years and said nothing. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere in a marriage, but what I witnessed at that gala, he stopped. You deserved better, from him and from those of us who enabled his behavior by staying silent. The apology landed with unexpected weight. Marcus Whitmore was one of the most powerful men in the city's financial sector. His acknowledgement of complicity meant something. Thank you, Rachel said quietly. I'd also like to discuss the possibility of Meridian hiring your firm for some upcoming projects. We're renovating 3 satellite offices and building a new training center. Nothing as extensive as Lindquist Capital, but substantial work. Rachel's breath caught. You're offering me contracts? I'm offering you the opportunity to bid on contracts, which, given the quality of your Lindquist designs, means you'll likely win them. Marcus's smile was audible through the phone. Consider it a small step toward making amends. After they hung up, Rachel sat staring at her computer screen. The boys' club that had sustained Daniel's career was fracturing, not because she'd attacked it, but because Daniel's own actions had exposed its cracks. She called Catherine to report the conversation. Meridian's investigation could impact the settlement, her lawyer said immediately. If they find evidence of fraud, Daniel might face criminal charges. That could affect his ability to pay alimony and child support. What should I do? Nothing. This isn't your problem to solve. If Daniel's committed fraud, that's between him and Meridian's legal team. Our settlement is locked in. He's obligated to pay regardless of his employment status. But it nagged at Rachel. Not concerned for Daniel, he'd created his own disaster, but worry about Emma and Jake. How would they process watching their father's professional collapse? What would it do to them to see him prosecuted, possibly convicted? She pushed the thoughts aside and focused on work. The Lindquist project moved into implementation phase. Walls came down. New infrastructure went up. Rachel spent hours on site, conferring with contractors and solving problems in real time. She remembered this feeling, the deep satisfaction of seeing vision become reality, the collaborative energy of a team working toward a shared goal. She'd missed this, more than she'd realized. In February, Emma came home from school with a project assignment. We have to interview someone we admire and write about their journey, she explained, spreading her materials across the kitchen table. Can I interview you? Rachel's throat tightened. You admire me. Obviously. Emma rolled her eyes with the exasperation of someone explaining the obvious. You're like the bravest person I know. What makes you say that? Emma thought about it seriously. Because you were sad for a really long time. And then you stopped being sad and started being angry. And then you stopped being angry and started being strong. That's brave. Rachel pulled her daughter into a hug, overwhelmed by the clarity of children. They saw things adults worked hard to hide. The interview lasted 2 hours. Emma asked about Rachel's childhood, her design education, her early career. She asked about meeting Daniel, getting married, having children. Did you love Daddy? Emma asked. I did, very much. Do you still? Rachel considered lying, providing the sanitized version children were supposed to hear about their parents' failed marriages. Instead, she told the truth. I love who he was when we first met, or who I thought he was. But people change, Emma. Sometimes they become better versions of themselves. Sometimes they become worse. Your dad became someone I couldn't stay married to. Because he was mean to you. It wasn't a question. Yes. I'm glad you left, Emma said quietly. I didn't like who you were when you were with him. You were like a ghost. The observation cut clean through Rachel's chest. Her daughter had been watching, absorbing, learning that women could disappear inside marriages if they weren't careful. I'm not a ghost anymore, Rachel said. I know. Now you're a phoenix. Rachel laughed despite the tears in her eyes. Where did you learn about phoenixes? School. Miss Rodriguez told us about mythology. The phoenix burns up and then comes back from the ashes even more beautiful than before. Emma looked at her mother with absolute certainty. That's you. That night, Rachel couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Emma's words, about being a ghost, then a phoenix, about the journey from erasure to resurrection. She pulled out her laptop and began writing. Not designs or proposals, but something else. A narrative. Her story. In her words, she wrote about meeting Daniel, about the slow erosion of her career and confidence, about the moment at the gala when she'd finally chosen herself. The words poured out for hours. By dawn, she had 20 pages. Raw, honest, unflinching. She saved the document and closed her laptop, unsure what she'd do with it. But it existed now. Her truth, documented, no longer locked inside her head or trapped in the careful language of legal proceedings. In March, the Lindquist Capitol renovation reached its midpoint. The transformation was becoming visible, natural light flooding spaces that had been dim, collaborative areas replacing isolated cubicles, artwork commissioned from local artists bringing color and energy to every floor. Robert Lindquist walked the space with Rachel, marveling at the progress. This is exactly what I imagined, he said. Better, actually. You've created something that feels innovative without being cold, human without being soft. That's the goal. Spaces that reflect how people actually work, not how corporate mythology says they should work. I'm recommending you to everyone I know. Robert smiled. Be prepared for a lot more business. The referrals came quickly. By April, Rachel's firm had 6 major projects in various stages of development. She hired more staff, moved to a larger office, established systems and workflows that could scale. She was building something real, something that belonged entirely to her. Daniel's investigation concluded in late April. Meridian's internal audit found evidence of systematic expense fraud totaling over $200,000 spanning 3 years. The firm terminated his employment and referred the matter to the district attorney's office for potential prosecution. Mitchell Pemberton called Catherine with a warning. The DA is considering charges, wire fraud, tax evasion, possibly more. If they move forward, Daniel's looking at serious prison time. That's terrible, Catherine said, her sympathy utterly unconvincing. But it has nothing to do with my client. It has everything to do with your client. Rachel benefited from that money. The cars, the house payments, the lifestyle, all funded by fraudulent expenses. Prove she knew about it. Prove she had access to the accounts or understanding of where the money came from. Catherine's voice was steel. You can't, because she didn't. Daniel controlled everything. Rachel was a housewife who signed what her husband told her to sign. If the DA wants to prosecute her for being financially dependent on her spouse, they're welcome to try. But I guarantee it won't go well. The DA ultimately declined to charge Rachel with anything. Daniel, however, wasn't as fortunate. In May, he was indicted on 4 counts of wire fraud and 2 counts of tax evasion. Rachel found out from a news alert on her phone. She stared at the headline, feeling nothing but a distant sadness for the children who'd have to process their father's public disgrace. She called Catherine. How does this affect the settlement? It doesn't. The agreement is locked in. If Daniel can't pay from income, it comes from assets. He has plenty of assets, even after Meridian's clawback. What about the kids? Catherine's voice softened. That's harder. They're going to need therapy, support, honesty about what their father did and why it was wrong. But Rachel, that's not your responsibility to manage. Your job is to be stable, to show them what integrity looks like, to model the opposite of everything Daniel represented. Rachel thought about Emma's phoenix comment, about rising from ashes. "I can do that," she said. The trial was scheduled for September. Daniel's lawyers worked frantically to negotiate a plea deal, but the DA's office was uninterested. The case was too high profile, the evidence too damning. Rachel watched it unfold from a distance, focused on her work and her children. She attended Emma's art shows and Jake's soccer games. She met deadlines and exceeded client expectations. She hired a business manager to handle finances so she'd never again be ignorant of where money came from or how it was used. She built a life based on transparency instead of control. In June, Vanessa Clark reached out again. "I wanted you to know I'm leaving Meridian," she said when they met for coffee. Their second meeting, this time without recording or legal strategy. "Where are you going?" "Graduate school, Stanford Business School. I deferred my admission 2 years ago when Daniel hired me. I'm finally using it." "That's wonderful." Vanessa smiled, more genuine than Rachel had ever seen her. "I also wanted to thank you for not destroying me when you had the chance, for seeing me as a person instead of an enemy." "You weren't my enemy, Vanessa. You were just another person he manipulated." "Still, you could have been cruel. You weren't. That meant something." Vanessa hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "How did you know, at the gala? How did you know it was time to stop accepting his treatment?" Rachel thought about that night, about the red dress and the champagne and the moment she'd decided to exist again. "I didn't know," she said honestly. "I just knew I couldn't keep disappearing, that if I stayed invisible much longer, I'd forget I was ever real." Vanessa nodded slowly. "I think I was starting to disappear too, in a different way, becoming the person Daniel wanted me to be instead of who I actually was." She smiled. "So thank you for showing me what it looks like to choose yourself." After Vanessa left, Rachel sat for a while watching the city move past the window. How many women were out there right now, slowly erasing themselves to fit someone else's vision? How many were one conversation away from realizing they could stop? She thought about the document on her laptop, the story she'd written at 3 a.m. after Emma called her a phoenix. Maybe it was time to let other people read it. Rachel opened the document that night and read through what she'd written in the early morning hours months ago. The words still carried the raw honesty of someone processing trauma in real time, but they also held something else now: distance, perspective. The clarity that came from having survived the worst and discovered she was stronger for it. She added to it over the next several weeks. Not just her story, but the lessons embedded within it. How to recognize the signs of emotional manipulation. How financial dependence could become a cage. How to rebuild identity after it had been systematically dismantled. She wrote about the small daily choices that led to transformation. The decision to have coffee with Mia, the moment she'd signed that first contract, the night she'd chosen to stop apologizing for existing. By mid-July, she had a manuscript, 80,000 words that traced her journey from erasure to resurrection with unflinching honesty. She sent it to Mia first. The response came within hours. "This is extraordinary. Publish it. Women need to read this." Rachel stared at the message. Publishing meant going public in a way the Gala never had. The Gala had been 300 witnesses to a single moment. Publishing would be thousands of readers examining every intimate detail of her marriage's collapse. The confidentiality clause in her settlement agreement loomed large. She pulled it out and read the exact language. Party A agrees not to publicly discuss the financial terms of this settlement or make disparaging statements about Party B's character or conduct during the marriage. Financial terms. Disparaging statements. She wasn't discussing money, and she wasn't disparaging Daniel. She was documenting her own experience. There was a difference between disparagement and truth-telling. She called Catherine. "Read this section," Rachel said, reading the clause aloud. "If I publish a memoir about my marriage without mentioning specific dollar amounts or attacking Daniel's character, does that violate the agreement?" Catherine was quiet for a long moment. "It's a gray area. Daniel's lawyers could argue that any public discussion of the marriage constitutes disparagement. They could try to sue for breach. Would they win? Probably not, especially if you frame it as your personal experience and avoid editorializing about his motives or character. But they could make it expensive and painful to defend." Rachel thought about Daniel in prison jumpsuit orange, his carefully constructed image shattered beyond repair. He had nothing left to lose and every reason to lash out at the woman he blamed for his destruction. What if I changed names and identifying details? Made it explicitly fiction? Then you're protected. First Amendment covers creative work. But Rachel, is that really what you want? To hide behind fiction when your power comes from authenticity? The question sat heavy between them. Let me think about it, Rachel said. She spent the next week wrestling with the decision. Part of her wanted the catharsis of publishing her truth without filters or legal maneuvering. But another part, the part that had learned to be strategic rather than reactive, recognized that protecting her children mattered more than public vindication. Emma and Jake were already processing enough. Their father's criminal trial loomed. Their family structure had been completely reorganized. Adding a public memoir that dissected their parents' marriage seemed cruel. Rachel made the decision on a Tuesday morning while drinking coffee and watching the sunrise. She would publish, but she'd fictionalize. The changes were subtle but significant. Rachel Hart became Rebecca Harper. Daniel Hart became David Harrison. Meridian Holdings became Meridian Financial. The city became unnamed. The Gala became a charity auction. The specifics blurred just enough to create legal distance while maintaining emotional truth. The core remained intact. A woman's slow erasure inside a controlling marriage. The moment she chose to stop disappearing. The painful, powerful journey of reclaiming herself. She titled it The Breaking Point and sent it to a literary agent Mia recommended. The response came in 3 days. This is exactly what we need right now. When can we talk? The agent, Monica Tran, was a force of nature, sharp, strategic, and utterly convinced the book would resonate with readers hungry for stories about women choosing themselves. The market is saturated with divorce memoirs, Monica explained during their first call. What makes yours different is the transformation arc. You don't just leave, you become someone more powerful than you were before the marriage. That's the story women need. Within 2 weeks, Monica had secured a publishing deal with a mid-sized press known for narrative nonfiction and fictionalized memoir. The advance was modest but meaningful, enough to fund Emma's orthodontist bills for a year and Jake's soccer camp. The publication date was set for April, almost exactly 2 years after the gala that changed everything. Daniel's trial began in September as scheduled. Rachel attended only the days when Vanessa testified, sitting in the back of the courtroom to offer silent support. Vanessa was extraordinary on the stand, calm, detailed, unshakable, even under Mitchell Pemberton's aggressive cross-examination. She walked the jury through Daniel's fabrications, the manufactured text, the systematic theft of credit for her work. She presented the evidence of billing fraud with the precision of someone who'd spent months preparing for this moment. When Pemberton tried to suggest she was testifying to protect Rachel, Vanessa looked him directly in the eye. I'm testifying because Daniel Hart committed fraud and used his position of power to manipulate young employees into complicity, she said clearly. What he did to his wife is separate from what he did to Meridian Holdings. Both are wrong. Both deserve consequences. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing was scheduled for November. Daniel faced up to 15 years in federal prison. Rachel felt no satisfaction when she heard the verdict. Only a deep, abiding sadness for the man who'd had every advantage, education, opportunity, success, and chose to abuse it all in service of his own ego. She told Emma and Jake that evening, sitting them down in the living room and explaining in age-appropriate terms what had happened. Daddy made some bad choices at work, Rachel said carefully. He took money that didn't belong to him and lied about it. The court decided he has to go to prison as a consequence. Jake's eyes were huge. For how long? We don't know yet, but it will be a while. Emma was quiet, processing. Finally, she spoke. Is it our fault? The question broke Rachel's heart. No, sweetheart. None of this is your fault. These are choices Daddy made. Adult choices that have nothing to do with you and Jake. But if you hadn't divorced him, if I hadn't divorced him, he still would have committed fraud. He still would have gotten caught. The divorce didn't cause this. His choices did. They cried together that night, grieving not the man Daniel was, but the father the children deserved and would never have. Therapy helped. Dr. Sarah Chen, a child psychologist who specialized in family transitions, met with Emma and Jake weekly. She gave them tools to process their father's choices without internalizing shame or guilt. Children of incarcerated parents often struggle with identity, Dr. Chen explained to Rachel. They wonder if bad behavior is genetic, if they're destined to make similar choices. Your job is to model the opposite, to show them that character is built through consistent ethical decisions, not inherited through DNA. Rachel threw herself into that work. She volunteered at Emma's school, coached Jake's soccer team, created family rituals around honesty and accountability. Sunday dinners where everyone shared something they were proud of and something they'd struggled with. Monthly adventure days where they tried new things together, museums, hiking trails, cooking classes. She wanted her children to associate family with joy, not trauma, with possibility, not limitation. The Lindquist Capital Project reached completion in October. The ribbon-cutting ceremony drew 200 guests, business leaders, architects, design professionals, and journalists covering the renovation that had transformed a dated office building into a model of contemporary workplace design. Robert Lindquist gave a speech praising Rachel's vision and execution. When I hired Rachel Hart 18 months ago, I was taking a chance on a designer who hadn't worked in years, he said. What I didn't realize was that I wasn't taking a chance at all. I was hiring someone who'd spent those years learning resilience, developing empathy, understanding what it means to create spaces where people can thrive. This building isn't just beautiful, it's humane. And that's because Rachel Hart understands what it means to reclaim your humanity after someone tries to take it from you. The audience erupted in applause. Rachel stood at the front of the room, surrounded by the space she'd created, and felt the full weight of how far she'd come. After the ceremony, Marcus Whitmore approached her. "I have a proposition," he said. "Meridian is redesigning our headquarters. 3 buildings, 40 floors total. I want you to lead the project." Rachel's breath caught. Meridian. The company where Daniel had built and destroyed his career. The firm that had enabled his behavior for years before finally holding him accountable. That's a complicated offer, Marcus. I know, which is why I'm making it. Meridian needs to be rebuilt from the inside out. Not just physically, but culturally. We need spaces that reflect accountability instead of hierarchy, transparency instead of secrecy. You understand those principles better than any designer I've worked with. Rachel thought about it. The opportunity was massive, career-defining work that would establish her firm as a major player in corporate design. But it also meant spending years inside the environment that had sustained Daniel's worst impulses. "I'll need complete creative control," she said, "and I'll need Meridian's leadership to commit to actual cultural change, not just aesthetic renovation." "Done," Marcus said immediately. "Send me a proposal." Rachel walked out of the Lindquist building that night feeling like she was walking on air. Her phone buzzed with congratulatory texts from Mia, from former colleagues, from clients who'd seen the coverage and wanted to work with her. One message stood out. From Vanessa. "Saw the Lindquist coverage. You're changing the world, one building at a time. Proud to know you." Rachel saved that message and looked up at the building behind her. Light poured from every window, illuminating the structure she'd designed. Inside, people were working in spaces that honored their humanity instead of demanding their subordination. This was legacy. This was impact. This was who she'd always been meant to become. Daniel's sentencing happened on a cold November morning. The judge gave him 8 years in federal prison with the possibility of parole after 5. It was less than the maximum, but more than Mitchell Pemberton had hoped for. Rachel didn't attend. She was in a design meeting, presenting preliminary concepts for the Meridian headquarters renovation. She found out about the sentence from a news alert, the same way she'd learned about most of Daniel's legal proceedings. She read it, felt a distant pang of something that might have been sympathy, and returned to her presentation. Daniel was no longer her story. He was a chapter she'd closed. The book launched in April to modest but meaningful attention. Reviews praised its honest exploration of emotional abuse and economic control. Women's advocacy organizations used it in discussion groups. Therapists recommended it to clients navigating divorce from narcissistic partners. Rachel did a small book tour, readings at independent bookstores, interviews with podcasts focused on women's empowerment, a panel discussion at a domestic violence awareness conference. At every event, women approached her with the same story. They were living the life Rachel had escaped, slowly disappearing inside marriages that demanded their erasure. They wanted to know how she'd found the courage to leave. "I didn't find courage," Rachel told them honestly. "I found clarity. I realized that staying was killing me slowly, and leaving might be hard, but at least I'd be alive." Emma came to one of the readings, sitting in the back row with Mia and Rachel's mother. Afterward, she hugged Rachel tightly. "I'm proud of you, Mom," she whispered. Those 5 words meant more than any review or sales figure ever could. By summer, Rachel's firm had grown to 23 employees working out of a full floor in the converted warehouse. The Meridian headquarters project was in full swing, transforming Daniel's old workplace into something unrecognizable, open, collaborative, flooded with natural light. She'd hired 3 survivors of domestic violence to her team, creating a workplace culture that explicitly supported women rebuilding their careers after trauma. She established a scholarship fund for design students from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. She mentored young designers the way she wished someone had mentored her. She built the professional environment she'd needed 15 years ago. In August, Jake asked about visiting his father in prison. He was 8 now, old enough to understand consequences, but young enough to still believe in redemption. "I want to see if he's okay," Jake said quietly. Rachel's first instinct was to say no, to protect her son from the reality of his father's choices. But Dr. Chen had been clear, denying the children access would only feed fantasies about Daniel's situation. "We can arrange a visit," Rachel said, "but we need to talk first about what you might see and how it might feel." They prepared carefully. Dr. Chen did role plays with Jake about managing his emotions. Rachel explained the prison visiting rules and what to expect. The visit was harder than Rachel anticipated. Seeing Daniel in prison khakis, his confidence stripped away by institutional life, stirred complicated feelings. She didn't love him anymore, hadn't for years, really. But she mourned the person he could have been if he'd chosen differently. Jake talked to his father about school and soccer. Daniel asked questions that suggested genuine interest, though Rachel suspected it was performance more than connection. When visiting hours ended, Jake hugged his father and whispered something Rachel couldn't hear. In the car afterward, Jake was quiet. "What did you say to him?" Rachel asked gently. "I told him I forgive him, but I'm not going to be like him." Rachel's vision blurred with tears. Her 8-year-old son had just demonstrated more emotional maturity than most adults achieved in a lifetime. "That was very brave, sweetheart. Dr. Chen says forgiveness is for me, not for him. So I don't carry around angry feelings that make me sick. Dr. Chen is very smart." "I know." Jake looked out the window. "I still love him, Mom, even though he did bad things." "I know, baby. That's okay. Love and accountability can exist together." Emma chose not to visit. She was 12 now, old enough to make her own choices about her relationship with her father. She wrote him letters sometimes, short, careful updates about her life that maintained connection without vulnerability. Rachel supported both children's choices without judgment. They were navigating impossible complexity with grace and resilience that constantly amazed her. In September, the Meridian headquarters renovation was completed. The transformation was stunning, everything Rachel had promised and more. Marcus Whitmore gave another speech, this one explicitly acknowledging the company's past failures and commitment to cultural evolution. "This building represents our future," he said. "A workplace designed by someone who understands the cost of toxic environments because she survived one." We're grateful to Rachel Hart not just for her design genius, but for her willingness to help us become better. After the ceremony, Patricia Henderson, the woman who'd once told Rachel that successful men required invisible wives, approached with tears in her eyes. "I owe you an enormous apology," Patricia said. "For years I perpetuated the same toxic beliefs that nearly destroyed you. I watched you disappear and told myself it was normal, expected. The price of being married to an ambitious man. It's okay, Patricia. It's not okay. But I'm trying to be better. I've started volunteering with a women's shelter, teaching job skills training, trying to help other women avoid the mistakes I made." Rachel hugged her. Everyone was on their own journey from complicity to consciousness. Patricia's just took longer to start. The second book launched the following spring. This one wasn't about her marriage. It was about the architecture of transformation, how physical spaces could facilitate healing, encourage collaboration, reflect values. She dedicated it to Emma and Jake, who taught me that becoming whole is the greatest gift we can give our children. It sold better than the first, won an industry award, led to speaking engagements at design conferences and business schools. Rachel Hart became known not just as a talented designer, but as someone who understood the deep relationship between environment and identity. Someone who created spaces that honored human dignity. On the 5-year anniversary of the Gala, Rachel stood in her office looking out at the city skyline. Her firm employed 37 people. She'd completed projects in 6 states. She'd helped rebuild the careers of 14 women who'd left the workforce to support partners who didn't value them. Emma was 15, thriving in the advanced art program, and already thinking about design school. Jake was 11, captain of his soccer team and the most empathetic child Rachel had ever known. Daniel was 3 years into his sentence, working in the prison library and attending the therapy that parole would eventually require. They'd all survived. More than survived. They'd transformed. Rachel pulled out her phone and scrolled to the photo from that night 5 years ago. The woman in the red dress, head high, walking into a ballroom to reclaim her existence. She barely recognized that woman now, not because she'd changed, but because she'd become more fully herself. The journey from that moment to this one had been brutal and beautiful in equal measure. She'd lost a marriage but gained a life. She'd sacrificed security but discovered strength. She'd been broken down and chose to rebuild into something unbreakable. Her phone rang. A new client calling about a project designing a women's business incubator. A space where women could launch careers, access resources, support each other's success. "When can you start?" the client asked. Rachel smiled, looking out at the city she'd reclaimed as her own. "I already have," she said, because the truth was, she'd been starting over every single day since that night at the Gala. Every morning she woke up and chose to exist fully. Every project she accepted that honored her worth. Every boundary she set that protected her peace. Starting over wasn't a single moment. It was a practice. And Rachel had become very, very good at it. That evening, she took Emma and Jake to dinner at the restaurant where she and Daniel had celebrated their first anniversary a lifetime ago. Back then, she'd been trying to become someone worthy of his love. Tonight, she was simply celebrating being worthy of her own. "Mom, you're smiling weird," Emma observed. "Am I?" "Yeah, like you know a secret." Rachel laughed. Maybe she did know a secret, the secret that had taken her 42 years and one spectacular public confrontation to learn. That the most powerful thing a woman could do wasn't to be loved by the right person. It was to refuse to be diminished by the wrong one. She raised her glass in a silent toast to the woman she'd been, the woman she'd become, and the woman she was still becoming. To every choice that had led her here, to every moment of courage, no matter how small, to the breaking point that had become her breakthrough. Emma and Jake raised their glasses too, not fully understanding but sensing the significance. "What are we toasting?" Jake asked. Rachel looked at her children, these incredible humans she was raising to understand that character was built through choices, that integrity mattered more than image, that being whole was more important than being perfect. "To freedom," she said, "and to never forgetting what it cost." They clinked glasses, the sound clear and bright and full of promise. Outside, the city lights sparkled against the darkening sky. Somewhere in those buildings, women were making the same calculations Rachel had made 5 years ago, wondering if they could survive on their own, questioning whether they deserved better, contemplating whether the leap into uncertainty was worth the risk. Rachel hoped they'd find their breaking points before they disappeared completely. She hoped they'd discover, as she had, that on the other side of breaking was freedom. And freedom, once tasted, was impossible to forget. Rachel finished her wine and signaled for the check. Tomorrow, she had a morning meeting with a potential client. Emma had an art show opening. Jake had soccer practice. Her life was full and complicated, and entirely her own. She wouldn't change a single moment of it, not even the painful ones, especially not those. Because the woman who'd walked into that ballroom in a red dress hadn't been born that night. She'd been excavated, piece by piece, choice by choice, reclaimed from the rubble of a marriage built on control. And the woman who walked out of that restaurant 5 years later, flanked by her thriving children, was the fullest expression of everything she'd fought to become. Whole, present, unbreakable. Finally, permanently, magnificently free.